You see, something's going to happen.
What? What's going to happen?
Something wonderful.
What?
I understand how you feel. You see, it's all very clear to me now.
Welcome to the Occult Rejects. This episode, we got a five-headed beast coming at you. We got myself, Headless Giant, Jin the Ninja, Ethan Indigo, and the numbers man himself, TJ, Contemporary Problems. Tonight, this episode has been brought to you by Ethan Indigo, and it was his idea to bring up the number 8, which is a huge number for me in itself. You know that I love talking about 2, 4, 6, and 8. So when he mentioned 8, I was like, of course, let's talk about it. And I figured this was a perfect reason to get TJ on. He's the numbers guy. So when we get the show going, even though it was Ethan's show, we are going to cover the numbers stuff Contemporary Problems brought first. And but before that, we will go around the room and we will let everybody introduce themselves so all the new listeners know who these people are and where you can find all of their amazing work. Besides the Occult Rejects, they all do amazing stuff on their own that I highly suggest to please go check out. You're missing out on a lot if you don't, in my opinion. Headless, let's start with you. What is up, my man?
I am the Headless Giant. You can find me on X, shit posting all day, and I'm way behind on my podcasts. So definitely check that out. I'm going to be having a big Goat Man special for Halloween, so it's going to be a Goat Man spectacular.
Awesome. Looking forward to that. Nice. And Jin, let everybody know what is up, please. My favorite ninja.
Well, thanks, Nick. Thanks, Ethan. Thanks, TJ. Thanks, Headless. And so you can find me on Twitter at Wukong Reborn, WUKONG Reborn. On Insta at Threshold Saints. I just dropped part 3 of my Tracy Twyman series, Clock Shavings, with another Zach, not the same Zach, but a different Zach. And we talk about channeling and Goesha and Kali and the nature of time. And Louis from Uncanny Mystic Minds, and
nice.
I just dropped a Swapcast as well. So
nice. I like Louis. He's a good dude.
Yeah, he's a good dude.
Real solid guy.
Cool dude.
You know what? And not to interrupt you and everybody else, but I highly suggest to go check out the Planetary Magic series I did with Louis. It's pretty good.
100%.
Yes.
I may have gone to mention.
And thank you again, Jin, for coming on. We always enjoy having your perspective on things. Ethan, what is up, man? Let everybody know where your stuff is at.
Well, I'm, in all the usual notorious social media nooks and crannies. And thank you, Nick, so much for bringing us all together. It's my honor to speak with you guys always. I love hearing your ideas. I'm pretty easy to find on the social media, and some of the stuff that I was going to present even was inspired by previous conversations about numbers between us, right? So I'm excited to get into it, and
that is awesome.
An article is, of course, on the Occult Rejects that I even edited.
Yes.
So.
Yeah, I do want to add, Ethan Indigo does have a lot of work that he has even done on occultresearchinstitute.org. That is, it's kind of like the Occult Rejects website in a sense. You're not really going to find, stuff linking you directly to us, but it is like a lot of our work and stuff that we think is important, and separate stuff by plenty of other people. There's a lot of people who have contributed on there, and I will say Ethan is one of the ones that does contribute it quite oftenly, actually. So thank you very much, and definitely go check out his stuff. It's on there, and I think it's even on his own stuff. So you can always go to his site, too, and check it out. Thank you very much, Ethan. And last but not least, my man, TJ, what is up, bud?
What's up? I'm TJ. I run Contemporary Problems. I have 7 Instagram accounts, but Contemporary Problems is my main one. I recently just put out a series called Get In Loser, We're Healing, where I focus on different aspects of ourselves, kind of using esoteric practices and astrology and stuff, but to focus on who we are and how we can all get better a little bit, do a little extra healing or whatever. And that's Contemporary Problems podcast and everything. You can find me at contemporaryproblems.com and wherever you search Contemporary Problems.
Awesome. And I have all their notes and links in the bottom. Yeah, so I guess we'll get into it. And I wasn't going to go live, but I thought it might have been a good idea because I thought like even people in the chat might have stuff to add. So hopefully, if you do, please add, and we'll throw it up on the screen. And we'll get right into it. And we're going to start off with the slides first with contemporary problems, and then we'll get into some discussion. Here we go. There you go, sir. Take us away, TJ.
Tried to make this a little bit more unique and focus on other aspects that people might not think about. So 8, I see it as this kind of snakes and ladders, as the 8 represents the Ouroboros and the loops, but then the H represents the ladders. And so what you do with that energy, do you like get snaky with it, or do you do the work and climb the ladder? 8 is a very material number. And as you can see, the big H is the ladder, but the little h is a chair. And that will come up again. But then if we look at the different definitions of ladder, it's belonging to a time or a period or relating to something. So 8 really has to do with the limitations. Even though it's like supposed to be the infinity sign, there's a secret kind of hidden limitation to what that is for the infinity. And then same with chair, like we know what a chair is, but from like a different definition, like it has to do with authority. It has to do with that kind of thing, like holding a chair more than just sitting in a chair. But it all has to kind of do with, I think it's Saturn's number. That's up for debate, but in the next slides to come, I kind of bring up how it's Saturn.
Okay. Oh, yeah, sorry. Oh, that's right. I have to. Here we go. Oh, something I did want to add with the H? I do feel like, to me it might show, like, I'll use Toth, I guess. I mean, there's other people that way I could use. It's just easy for me to use Toth. It could be seen as like somebody as like a messenger who can go in between both worlds. I have wondered if like the H is almost kind of showing that, like, the connection to be between both ends. As crazy as that sounds, or weird as that sounds, almost even kind of like the magician with the letter H. In my opinion, if you're a magician and you've had that experience, you have gone to one side and come back again. So I do wonder if like the H or the ladder kind of represents that. And the thing the interesting thing with this chair, I mean, you know how many gods you see just sitting on chairs?
And tarot cards. I didn't pull them all up, but I noticed that. I'm like, they're all in chairs. They're all sitting down.
Yep. Very interesting. I mean, that's even the God pose. That's like one of the poses. I mean, even I don't know so about OTO, but Crowley's books, his Libras, it's suggest like one of the God poses, the God pose to do in meditation. Like you're literally just sitting there in a chair with a straight back, your head there, and your hands just on your legs. Like you're literally sitting in a chair doing the God pose, and that's your meditation. So there's something to it, I'm assuming.
Well, in Greek mythology, they call Hades the throne of the gods. So it's like all things are resting on those 4 points, And so you've got that angle of like the 4 points, the 4 elements. That's what's holding up the world. Those are the pillars that sort of hold up all the gods and everything else.
That's even like when you see those 4. I think there's like a thing of Janus. I forgot what it was. I've shown it on the show, and it's like a 4-columned like thing. I see what you're saying. Kind of built like that, like a bottom of a chair. Yeah.
One of the proto symbols for 8 before it's the modern version is very much like an H, except there's one leg missing, and then you have the kind of one leg and then the opposite stem going up, the opposite sided stem going up. It's kind of like a half 8 almost. So it's the proto symbol for 8 is very much similar to that 8, the small h.
Thank you.
And then
sorry, TJ.
Go ahead.
I just wanted to say that I actually agree with you that I think 8 is really interesting because it can be interpreted as both a Saturnian number, a mercurial number, and also a dragon number. And I don't think any of those are wrong in any way. I think you can make a case, just like Nick said, like it is climbing up the ladder and it's climbing back down. It's like it's infinite, right? It's always, there's a cyclical element to it, and there is obviously in Vedic astrology it is Saturn, but then in Kabbalah you could say that it is Mercury. So I just think like that's really interesting to me that there's this multifaceted interpretation and none of them are really wrong. And usually I would take a much harder position against.
Take a much harder position. I like that.
Yeah, this was just showing. Oh, I was just gonna say this slide. It's just showing like the Masonic uses the ladder, but then chairs are significant. Sure, we're like chairs are common. We're all sitting in chairs right now, but at the same time, it's still a very much part of the ritual. Is like these chairs and these like carved fancy chairs. So that's just what this slide is.
I was going to throw in there that the link to Saturn and Hermes and Zeus would be the throne of heaven. So Hermes is the angel of Zeus, or he's the messenger of Zeus. And so Zeus is sitting on the throne of Kronos. So he took it over from his father. So there's a linkage there.
Wow.
Very nice. Move on to the next one.
So where we see the H most common is in health. We see that's the hospital. Go find the H. What does the H mean? Well, the phonetic spelling of H is ACH. Add an E to that, you get the word ache. So this H and this 8 are connected to like the grind a bit, like feeling the pain. It's like that's even why it fits with the ladder and the chair. It's like after you climb the ladder and you get back down, you might have to take a seat. You might have to rest and recover. And then, so like the snake symbolism we know in like the medical kind of world or whatever, right? But it's like it's the hose. A hose is also a snake, so it's like the hose. You go to the hose pedal, right? The snake in the garden, and then like the very like normal experience in that going to there is sitting in that waiting room. Like they have to sit you down in that waiting room, like for usually an hour or longer. Like you never just go straight in. They have to put you in those chairs, which is like a very interesting kind of thing that I just kind of picked up on. But the 8 has a lot to do kind of with the pain a little bit, and it's about like enduring that as well.
If I could jump in there. So the original word for 8, well, at least the Roman/Greek word is lemnisket. And the lemnisket is the figure 8. It's the mathematical term for that figure 8. And what's interesting is it comes from lemniskos, which means ribbons, or sort of a kind of a wrapping ribbon, right? Which was Hermes' original staff, was ribbons, because that's how you would tell the herald apart from the soldier on the battlefield. They'd carry these banners which would say, "Don't kill me." So on the ancient battlefields, the heralds were sort of untouchable because they were supposed to report back to the king how things were going on the battlefield. So you'll see in some Greek pottery, there's 2 heralds watching Achilles and Hector going at it, because they're the ones reporting back to the king. Well, that goes directly into Hermes symbolism, because the first symbol he had was the 2 ribbons wrapped around the pole. And then Zeus gave him the 2 snakes, sort of like that symbol of eternity, constantly shedding the skin. And so in the I believe it was the 1930s or 40s, the Army Corps of Engineers, not Corps of Engineers, there was the Medical Corps, misattributed the single snake, which is the symbol for Asclepius, the healer with the H, right? And also they put the symbol of Hermes there instead. So they transformed it from the symbol of healing, which is the single snake, to the double snake, which is the symbol for commerce. And so ever since then, the hospital has been a symbol of commerce.
Oh, yikes.
Without even knowing it, right? So where are we at today? So people say the gods are dead. They're right there in front of you. Like, you can look at your bill, you'll see the gods there.
That was hilarious and true.
You guys good for me to go on to the next one?
Yep.
All right, there you go.
And then 8. So homonym for 8 is 8, like eating. And the 8 represents also the repeat, which is the reap, eat. And you reap with a sickle. So if it's like kind of like if you're not taking care of yourself, you might end up in that H building because you're getting sick from the sickle, and it's the Saturn sickles, which is the Saturn cycles. And right, Saturn's always going to be holding a sickle, and like it has to do with like where like it's all about like what comes around, right? So like the energy you put in with like especially 8 energy like comes back around, so it can be positive, but at the same time it's also like Saturn's using that energy to be of judgment. And then like the Egyptian version is Set, which is sit, right? Like this little H, you sit down. Jesus walks, Satan sits. That's kind of like how it goes.
Even the I find the eating weird, considering Saturn ate its own kids too.
Well, there's always that symbol of consumption when it comes to Saturn. He's consuming the fields of grain. He's consuming the flowers. That's a big thing in the Masonic circles. Is they always show him with the sickle in a field of flowers because he's chopping down the young flowers as they bloom, sort of like a symbol for taking people who are too young to die. And also in the hymn to Saturn, the Orphic hymn, they talk about how he is the god of reduction. So it's always reducing. He's not the jovial, always increasing. He's always reducing. So there's that aspect too.
I think it's interesting just to bring in some Hebrew etymology that the Hebrew word for number 8 is also oil in relation to consumption. And although I do find the Headless's Greek presentation always very fascinating, I've been looking a lot at the Mesopotamian and the Chinese astrology, and Saturn is really associated with the death of old age rather than the death of youth. So I find this sort of difference, like this vast, almost like I haven't quite bridged it, I guess, intellectually myself, but I do find it very interesting that there is such a divergence in view of who he is and what that planet is.
Oh, absolutely. Like the ideas about Saturn seem to change between every generation. Some say he's the most supreme god, and then others say, no, he's the devil. And then, you kind of get this, again, back to the cycles. They're just always constantly rotating. Is he a good guy? Is he a bad guy? People don't seem to be able to agree on that. And I think that there is a cycle involved in that.
Well, very well. Here we go down to the next one.
So loop, right? Oh, go ahead. Oh, he's gone.
Oh boy.
So loop backwards is pool. And then you also have the O in there making the 8. And then this is like Saturn has to do with limitations. Like it has to do with our limits and how far we can push those limits. But it's there to kind of be the resistance and show us what our limits are. So right, infinity, but finite, to be infinite, finite is like having it's literally defined as having limits, as like it having like kind of an end to its thing, and that connects also Saturn with associations with death. And then so like the loop and this infinity sign it also fits with, if Saturn is the deceiver, is it really what we think infinity is, or are we infinite? And then back to that H, like because it's loop pool, that H is hydrogen, and then the 8th element is oxygen, and then H2O. You ache 2O, you go out and you like reap what you sow, and you grind it out. And so like that's just kind of a part of it, and that just fits with like this Saturnistic realm of like put in the work, and it might cause you a bit of pain, but that pain is like what you contribute, what you have to show for your fruits and your harvest.
You know what I think is even another, you said it before, Headless, and I was too worried about like what was going on in the chat. Even with like the whole consumption and stuff and consuming, I think that's a buy-in to this reality to begin with. You know, I think that's kind of something that, you know, if you want to look at Saturn as a go between both worlds, maybe consumption is what kind of gets you into the flesh to begin with, or keeps you there. You know, so I could see that for sure.
Right, and if you look at the loop, the figure 8 itself, you can imagine the eyes as they cross over into the different parts of the brain, and sort of creating a feedback loop, and that feedback loop is what keeps you informed.
Kind of almost like literally like how your optic nerves do go into your brain. I mean,
Right.
It's very much like that. Yeah, for sure.
But then it feeds back out.
Yeah.
And then it comes right back, and then we're in that. So, you know, my thing right now is I'm trying to get into the dream body and how to work out the dream body, because it's sort of within that dream body paradigm that we can actually break out a form a little bit more than if it's just, you know, physical reality. Like we're constantly in this idea of physical reality, but it's the dreams that allowed ancient man to think outside of these problems that they were constantly in, you know? So I think there's go ahead.
I was going to say I have a recommendation for changing maybe you've actually experimented with it, but there's what we usually do is biphasic sleeping, right? Where we do 8 hours or whatever. But you know, one other type of sleeping is multiphasic. And that I found in my anecdotal experiences, I could have way more lucid dream connection, for instance. And it also made reality kind of dreamy as well. Even though I wasn't necessarily tired, but I really focused on experimenting with the multiphasic sleeping for a couple of weeks. And so just something to add to or change it up maybe for a day or two.
No, I agree. I think those loops, they're kind of self-imposed, you know? We're kind of self-imposing these loops on ourselves, just like that consumption angle. You know, you've got to consume to get into the reality, and then you basically have to consume so that you can consume, you know? And it's this constant cycle. But if there are keys, I think they would be found, you know, in the breaking out of that cycle, where, you know, dreaming and having experiences that are more ephemeral are outside of that form by definition. So you'll find a way outside the loop.
I just wanted to add that I thought what TJ said was really interesting in the slide before about the infinite, because, you know, Saturn often gets attributed as this restrictive, sort of patriarchal.
Gets a bad
figure,
rap.
right?
That really does get a bad rap, I think.
Yeah, no, he definitely does. Like a way, I think it's overly, because it's really Mars that has that restrictive quality, because it sits in dialectical opposition to Jupiter. Like it's really Gavura that holds the hammer and pulls it back.
Yeah, well, it's so even known as like a good way to even look at Gabor would be like if you had cancer and you cut it off. I mean, you know what I'm saying? It's gonna be very restrictive.
Yes, exactly. And so really what Saturn does is he sets the boundary. Boundaries aren't necessarily bad, because we need boundaries, you know, even to set like a magical circle. That's a protective barrier between you and something else. So I do think that there is this element where Saturn can take you out, but I do agree with Nick that there's a buy-in. So but there's also like this element where he can push you through, but it's really difficult. So I think it's really interesting just to bring this up, because this has been like a major topic on Twitter, is this idea of Krishna. Krishna is associated with Saturn very closely, and he is said to make your life a lot more difficult, like for people who are Krishna bhaktis or worship Krishna very with loving kindness. So there's this idea that it makes your life harder because he's pulling you through the densities of Saturn, because Saturn is obviously very dense, it's leaden. So I just think that there's something interesting with that. It's like there are different tools and sort of conceptual ways of thinking that can move you through, but they're all very difficult. They're all like it's a hard planet. It's the planet of karma, right? So everything he's going to do, he loves hard work, he loves difficulty, he loves obstacles. That doesn't make him evil. It just makes him he's trying to help us work out our bullshit right now.
You know, I do want to add what Stein is saying here too. I mean, it's interesting. You get, you know, the double O's, the 007. What's his face used that originally with D, right? And even if you throw the T in there, you got OTO. You know, I mean, it's kind of interesting.
Very interesting.
All right, on to the next. Here we go.
So this is just like looking at this not as like the physical pH, but there might even be something to that as well. And the pH color also fits with the chakras as well, where Saturn would be associated with the acidic energy and Christ would be associated with the alkaline energy. And like Saturn is the root chakra, or has a lot to do with that. Sure, it has to do with the crown, but I think that's just, again, that's like meeting the kind of, Saturn's kind of like the final boss as well, but the Christogram is the P and Saturn is the H. So like, it's about finding that balance. Like you can't just go full like starseed Jesus mode. You're not going to do well. You're not going to survive in this reality. And if like, you're just going to like focus only on the mundane and the reality and whatever, you're going to miss out on all this other stuff. So it's really about finding that neutral pH, which would be like in the heart center, and being centered in that as well.
You wonder if that's why the emerald tablet is supposedly green? Like, I don't know. I have seen, my opinion, I do think when you get higher up, even though green's on the bottom of the tree, I do think green starts coming in as a color, maybe especially for male energy, in a sense, getting for symbology and something to do with the color, kind of crossing the abyss with Saturn, in a sense.
Well, that kind of goes into Hermes too, because Hermes is like the mediator or the balance between heaven and hell. He goes between the realms. He's also said to be a psychopomp, so he takes you over to the afterlife and hell as well. So there's that heaven and hell balance sort of thing right there.
I like that.
That's funny that it's the first color, because what do you call the new guy? He's green, right? And also I feel like the neophyte too usually gets a little assistance to that point, whereas like the higher up you go, the less people want to help you. So you get a little boost from the start.
Nice.
And then even on the balancing too, like with the astrological chart there, that's the color system that I use. And with that too, Libra is the balancing, and Libra isn't just protecting, like it's not just like holding in the light from the dark, it's also protecting the dark from the light. Like it kind of works astrologically almost like a customs agent. Like, where are you going? Why are you going here? Like, where are you going through? Are you ready for the darkness? Are you ready to enter Scorpio? Are you ready to enter this? Are you prepared? Like, let's see the proof. Let's see your balance. So that also just matching with all this is very interesting.
Well, to work off what TJ just said, I thought was really interesting, and then this will also tie into the green. But I think, like, so it was just the Feast of the Archangels a few days ago on the 29th. So I think that's really interesting, TJ, what you said about Libra, because the original iconography for St. Michael is him holding the scales. And he is the angel that moves from Hod into Tippereth. Like, he can be assigned Hod, which is Mercury, and then he can be assigned Tippereth, which is the sun. But in that sort of dialectical exchange, yes, he's also keeping the abyss corked. Like, he's putting his foot down and saying, you are here, and keeping it in. But then it's also, he can be the psychopomp that leads you through the darkness and back up. So I think that's really interesting. And then also in Vedic astrology, Bud, the planet Mercury, is considered to be emerald green, like how Nick was saying, like the emerald tablets. And I know like Netzach gets associated with green, but I also think that there is something maybe that happens at Mercury that it's reflecting green onto Venus or Netzach, or that's being reflected back onto Mercury. And so I think that there is something there. It's like a cosmological emerald tablet where it's like shining the light through, and then it's manifesting whatever material reality, but then also green associated with the will. So I think that's also really interesting.
Yeah, like even Netzach's associated with like love, and the color is green.
100%. The garden.
Neo, once he awakens, sees everything in green.
See, the reason why I even brought up the green too for the male stuff is like when he meets that guy and that chick in that restaurant, that dude is sitting there with green squares behind him. You know, and like he does, in my opinion, I think you're actually seeing Toth, maybe Hathor, whatever, Netzach and Hod together right there, because you have him who's like designing the programs, which is pretty much like Toth with writing and speech, and then you have her who wants to experience love and a kiss. And it's like you have both of them right there. And then eventually I think the reason, you know, why they fail, you know, whatever, has something to do with the energies not being able to separate completely. Why he never makes it past the architect, put it that way. But I think there's something there with that, with Hod and Netzach actually being shown in that. And that's part of the movie.
To hop in with the Greek equivalent, so everybody knows Lady Justice, right? She's standing out in front of the courthouse with the scales and the sword and the blindfold on. Well, there's that's actually the goddess Themis or her daughter Dike. And Themis was the goddess of balance. Like that's where we get the idea of this, you know, the Libra scales from. But also she was the goddess of family, and she was the first oracle at Delphi. So there's all this stuff having to do with prophecy, and that goes into why she's got the blindfold on, is she can see without sight. So if you have that sort of same predilection to see without sight, that's sort of the balance between good and evil, because you can see it without actually having the, you know, eyes to see. You can see through all of the bullshit. You can put the blindfold on and see right through it. So her story goes into, she was the oracle that told the Greek version of Noah about how to repopulate the earth. And what she said is, you have to throw the bones of your mother over your shoulder. And so the bones of his mother, he thought, was the rocks, because his mother would be Gaia. And so he's throwing these rocks over his shoulder, and the rocks come out to be new souls in this area. And what's interesting about the idea of the new souls coming into the area is Parmenides, a Greek philosopher who wrote On Nature, which actually started science and started basically formal logic. He was on a psychedelic trip when he wrote On Nature. And when he went into that sort of state, he said that there was a woman with a sword guarding the palace of night. And he had to make it around her to get in to understand the wisdom that was sort of being hidden, or this hidden idea of all things being one. And so that idea, you know, really encompasses this whole scales sort of thing. It's like you will be measured and then you will be cut, you know, and you see that too in the three fates. You know, it's the same sort of implements being sort of pointed at or described. It's the measurement and then the cutting that is sort of interesting about, you know, the psychic abilities. I think we've kind of lost that in our modern society. Psychics aren't really doing much cutting or measuring nowadays.
I like that.
So the 8 of diamonds, you can see the 8 hidden in it, in the white. You can see a perfect 8. This goes for all 8, for all the cards, all the suits in Cardomancy, but most specifically, you get that perfectly round 8 in the 8 of diamonds. And the diamonds are earth, like material limits, that whole kind of thing. And then the diamonds represent, in Cardomancy at least, it's kind of like the 5 senses, like of what an actual, sure, the diamond has 4, but a diamond is like that 5-sided kind of energetic thing. And then the strength card, and then like we've had on symbolic studies a bunch, and he talks about the connection with the lion and the snake, and then like cats and snakes. Very much, I think cats might be like some sort of dog snake hybrid. But that's just like that's just fun imagination. But it does like kind of seem like that, because they have all the similarities.
And the interesting thing is the slit eyes too. And if I remember correctly, I'm pretty sure Lisa can correct me if I'm wrong. I think she's the one who told me that only I think like venomous snakes have slit eyes as well.
Interesting.
If they have circular eyes, they're not poisonous or something like that.
Except for
Yeah.
cobras, it's the one
Oh.
exception, which is really interesting when you consider like the Moses' staff when he's like seeing the seraph for the first time, and he puts his staff down, and then I don't know, they put like a lambskin or something on it, but he there's like a serpent, like the serpent sort of that he summoned against the magicians of the court, which was a king cobra, they only eat snakes. So something really interesting about that as well, the snake that eats other snakes.
Oh,
That is interesting.
that is interesting. Yeah, I have to keep that in mind because I'm going to start getting a tattoo on my other arm worked on soon, and I'm redoing my version of the Emperor card. And I was going to add a snake revolving around the staff and then like kind of like sitting above the orb looking at you. And I was like going to use a slitted one because of the poison, but now I'm thinking about maybe the cobra because it eats other snakes. Like you kind of get like, you almost get now the hermit symbol with the snake eating itself. Like, I don't know.
Yeah, that's cool.
I thought cobras had like a figure 8 sometimes on their hoods, on the back of their necks.
It's the symbol of
know.
the nodes. Like the node where it's a circle and then kind of a horseshoe and another circle. And that's what they use in astrology to symbolize the north and south nodes.
Yeah, Ketu. So yeah, the cobra hood usually has Ketu, although you'll see some of the bigger ones in India, like a different species, sometimes they'll have the Rahu. And because Nagas, like in like sort of the Sanskrit cosmology, are cobras. Like that is what the snake people are always cobra people. But there are obviously other species. So there are python and monitors, Naga people, I guess you could say, but really there's cobras. That is the people who have the magic, who have the knowledge, who, safeguard the practices for the next aeon. That's how it's thought of.
Something I also want to add too, you have Crowley's, he reused it. The thing on the bottom, the snake and the lion, I forgot the name.
Demiurge.
Yeah. Even with that, I wonder if that even points back to, it sounds crazy, but like eyeball symbolism again. I had showed it, I think it was you guys were on when I was showing what the lens looks like when you look down on it. I said it kind of looks like a clock with all the ticks or a sandworm kind of like coming out at you. And then like inside your eyeball, you do have like a spot where it gets dark and then a spot where it's like really light and your hyaloid canal goes between it and that bends. Now, your lens kind of looks like that sun. And I guess where I'm going with this is that if you took both your eyes and put the hyaloid canal together, if they were both bent, one side makes an S and the other side would make an S. If you put them together, you get an 8. Both hyaloid canals bent together, you'd kind of have like maybe that 8 that's kind of being symbolized on the bottom. I could be totally off, but I do think that might actually be showing something with the eyeballs, possibly.
Well, I just want to say this about the snake and the lion, is that when Shiva is sitting with his wife, so sitting, again, they don't sit on a chair, but they're sitting, so when he's sitting with Durga, she rides a lion, and he always has his snake wrapped around his neck, Vasuki. So I think that's really interesting. Or sometimes it's on the ground. So there, it speaks to the same or perennial or whatever system that there is. That's what I think.
With and even I just wanted to add real quick, like if you had both eyes fully dilated, your hyaloid canal would look like an 11 for both eyes, and then if your other ones were pinned, they both look like S's or the SS. Where you could put them together and get an 8. But I do even find the 11 is kind of interesting how that goes along with Janus and other things. All right, I'm done.
So the 8th sign. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, I've got a bunch of pictures of snakes here.
Oh,
and so is that the Rahu or the Ketu?
Ketu.
That's
no
right.
idea.
Apologize.
Okay. And so this one would be Rahu, right?
I think so. I can't really see it, but yes, I believe it. I believe it is. If it's the upright one, it's just the same symbol, but it's just the loop is the U is on the upper instead of the lower.
Oh, okay. Got it.
The lock and a key.
So the 8th sign. Yeah. Yeah. So the 8th sign, Scorpio, the scorpion, Yeah, it's just another aspect of the number 8, and Scorpions, like it has to do with boundaries, but it also has to do with like your desires and temptations, which fits with that 8 loop. Whereas like if you give into your desires, it might seem like a simple thing, but if that you don't know, that might come back around, like like addiction or like gambling or something, you know, that it might come around and negatively and affect you later on. It might seem like a good idea at the time. You might give into those desires and temptations, but with that 8 energy, it could come around to bite you in the rear. And then Scorpions have beaks. They have 2 beaks on each side, or like double beaks, maybe, so it's like 4 kind of pieces or something, but they're called beaks as well. And when they bite you, it leaves like a lipstick, and that's where the mafia gets the kiss of death from, is because Scorpio also has to do with this kind of death thing. But then also with like the rise of the phoenix, it's like the scorpion is the lower realm of self, the eagle is the ego, and then once you master that, then you like will light up to the phoenix. And then the phoenix is also the phonics. Scorpios have to do with boundaries and potency and all this, but they're also like master communicators. They also have this like communication element to it, and that fits with the phoenix being the phonics.
Which also goes into Hermes. Master communicators.
I agree with this. It's really interesting because you could consider the tail of the scorpion, of the scorpion, to be like the perfect sort of analogy to Gavura. Like it goes in and then it comes back out, just like the motion of Gavura. Like it's restricting that sort of force of the water going forward, the infinite mercy, you could say, that happens. And so it's really interesting because in Tibetan Buddhism, the scorpion is often associated with martial magic. So very close association with Mars, which obviously just sits just below, like TJ just described, like a lower self and a higher self. Well, Binah would be the lot higher self, and Gavura would be sort of your more reactive self. So yeah, there's definitely something here that's really interesting. And then the phoenix with the fire, and then you could say it's kind of traveling upwards or up that pillar and coming into form. But then you're also not just coming into form at Saturn, you're also, or at Binah, you're also coming into understanding. So you're kind of, your perception of the world fundamentally changes when you're there. So you could say that is kind of a breaking of form as well. Like it's both things happening at the same time.
I've also, in my research, or just in like life or whatever, the phoenix also represents sort of this boiling point where all your emotions and everything are like almost like this catalyst, where it's like this breaking point where all your emotions, all your water and all that reach this boiling point, and it goes from liquid to gas. And gas, like the throat, the speaking, the breath, all that kind of thing. And what led me to that was like a couple years ago, the Super Bowl was on February 12th. So 212, which is boiling point in Fahrenheit, 212. And it was in Phoenix, Arizona. Phoenix Arizona. And that's what led me to this kind of, or to look further into that and the connection to the boiling point and the combustion of that to the next level, the catalyst.
Yeah, we didn't even talk about the water, but I think the water is a big part of that 8 symbol as well, because that is the limitation of life, right behind air, you know? Once you run out of water, you're gone, and that really is a limitation as well. So, you know, and the water almost seems like the infinite sort of receptacle for memory, you know?
Which we'll be talking about tomorrow. Be going live for that too.
Sorry about that.
Oh, I'm sorry, was there somebody who wanted to say something?
Oh yeah, I'll just add this really quick. I think what TJ said was thing about the phoenix, just because there is like a very alchemical and like allegory you could make with the water boiling at Gavura. Like that's where that sort of peak would be where you're sort of the golden vessels at Tipperith, and then you're applying the fire to the bottom, and then the water's inside, like Headless is saying, and then you're steam rising, and then you can rise obviously you're supposed to rise higher, so hopefully that's what you would do, or whatever, or your substance is being created and then comes back down to like the lower worlds. So I think that that's really interesting too, like a phoenix from fire into ash.
Yeah. I'm actually the 16th. I'm getting a scorpion tattoo also. I'm going crazy with the ink, actually. I knew, like, once I got started again, I'd fucking would. But I'm going to get it with the tail wrapping into the fucking eclipse. Like it's dipping its tail into the fucking black sun. It's going to look sick. Yeah,
Actually,
totally
also-
occulted, too. Totally occulted. Actually, once I get this one and the next one done, I probably will actually post them and, like, actually probably describe some of the stuff that's in there. And people will be like, holy shit, all of that's in there? And yes, that's how occult symbolism is done. You're not going to notice it, but I know it's there, and the tattoo artist was told to put it there. Yeah, it's pretty, it's even the person I have doing my stuff is like, I'm handing them pages of shit. And they're like, yo, I've never done stuff like this before. And I was like, I don't know what to tell you. I said, there is nothing that's going on my skin that doesn't have probably multiple reasons behind it. So, all right, on to the next one.
You know what else that symbol reminds me of? That constellation? Another interpretation? A multi-headed snake. And I'm not saying I have Ophiuchus on the right, and I'm not saying that Krishna is connected to Ophiuchus, or at least I don't have the work on that, but I definitely see as other side of Scorpio that has to do with this story.
Oh yeah, this definitely has a lot to do with that story. I mean, yeah, so he stands upon Seshnaga. Seshnaga is an 8-headed, obviously, cobra, serpent. You see that in Buddhist iconography, like the Nagas are very, very important. This idea of the dragon. It's not always Rahu, but in one way of thinking, you could say it's always Rahu, like when you see the 8-headed dragon, not because it necessarily is referring to that, but because he's such an important astrological character, and he is the king of the Nagas in our current yuga, if you want to go by Buddhism. So it makes a lot of sense, and it's sort of it's the creation and destruction at the same time. Like he can't create, but what Seshnaga can do is he can sort of unmake the bonds that Krishna draws in. So if we're saying Krishna is Saturnian, which he is, he's also associated with Kali very strongly. There's a syncretism that happens in Bengal between Krishna and Kali. So it's pure Saturn. It's just pure density, just like leaden in density, and it's just drawing you in and pulling you down. So Seshnaga's constantly destroying. There's like, it's an infinite loop. It's a process of constant creation and destruction.
Love it, love it.
And then there's even like the way that I could connect Krishna or whatever to Ophiuchus in the way is like in that story, it's like they both kind of come in to fix the situation. They both come in to kind of alleviate that situation. And then Ophiuchus, like Krishna's dancing on the snake, and then Ophiuchus has pulled the snake apart. So there's a little bit of a connection there.
You know what the things that I have thought about with this stuff too? Sorry, going back to the eyeball and getting fucking weird about it. With the way the muscle twists, when your pupil gets small, it spins closed. Like fucking camera, really. And I just got to add this. I got to start remembering this, to add this in every time I talk about your pupil. The muscle you have in your pupil is also in your ass. It is the same muscle, the sphincter muscle. Just got to throw that fun fact in there. So it screws closed. Your pupil screws closed. And I have wondered if like the snake wrapping around itself and then the idea of strength before with the lion is actually showing the energy to do so. Or actually making the change and having the strength to now close it instead of leaving it open. You're making a change in something, I think. I have wondered if that, like even on the Hermit card, the snake, or at least on the Golden Dawn one, the snake is on the bottom with its tail kind of in its mouth, and then there's like another one on an egg, and I do think it's like kind of showing you like one closed and one open. He's got one hand closed and one hand open. You know, I think they're showing a lot of that, and I do wonder if the snake is actually the pupil screwing closed. All right, I'm done. You want to go on to the next one?
Yep. So another reason I referenced Ophiuchus is because when you put a Q over the astrological wheel, when you have it set up with Cancer at the top, I do that too. A lot of times you'll see that the Masonic arches and all that will have Cancer at the top. And it's the peak time of summer in the West, so that's just the wheel that I go by, and it's just left to right. It's just clockwise. It's just what I use. You can't. The sign for Ophiuchus is a U. No words with Q. Like every word with a Q is followed by a U. And then, so in like the gematria of it, or just like in the number system, your 3-8 letters, or letters with 8, are H, Q, and Z, or Z. And so like your HQ, your headquarters, your QZ, the quiz, and then if you want to go all the way through that, it's hazy.
You got that purple haze.
Yeah.
Oh man, interesting.
And then yeah, we obviously
I love the
know
spiders.
like I could have added 8. We drink. They tell us 8 hours of sleep, 8 hours of work, 8 hours or 8 glasses of water, all that as well.
Yeah,
you know, stop
Teresa
sign,
was-
octopus, spiders. It's the spider web. The octopus and the spider have that same kind of energy as well. It was just fun that the Roman numeral 8 is a 5 and a 3, and then if you're, you know, if you ever purchase things, you purchase it in an 1/8, which is 3.5 grams. So you have that 5 and 3 there as well. And then yeah, it's just like the web. It kind of fits with this kind of resistance, like the stop sign and everything, right? It has something to do with the resistance, or like this grit that we put on ourselves.
And you know what's interesting? Well, I mean, there is a 0.5 in there, but an ounce is even 28 grams. So I mean, you even got again the 2 and the 8 that I always say. There's 2, 4, 6, 8 on the tree. There's something going on there. But I think it's 28.5 if you want to be technical about it. You know what's interesting too, and I don't want to take this too off course, but it's something I've thought about. I mean, it would probably only take like 20 minutes to cover. But even like driving signs, or like the stop signs and all those signs, and even the roads, I do think you can actually show how like the colors of the signs actually match like elemental or like occult stuff. I mean, even think about the stop sign. Again, that would be chaos and change. You were going, and now Gerbera steps in and you stop. You know what I'm saying? It is chaos and change from what you were doing already.
Yeah, that would totally make sense too with Krishna standing on the serpent, because the serpent's constantly breathing fire. In the story, not maybe in the iconography, but in the story, Sashanaga's constantly breathing the fire of destruction. So it's like he's Binah standing on Gerbera, that's constantly going out, but then it's also constantly coming back in.
You know what I love about this, in my opinion, if you're using the number 8 as showing you as a magician, that symbol on the bottom is fucking perfect. That S and the L, because again, that's going to show you the different variations of your hyaloid canal depending on how your pupil is. That's pretty fucking.
What's funny too, the snake of Asclepius.
I was waiting for you to bring that up.
Yeah, it's more like the dollar sign than it is like the Hermes sign. So it's almost like you've got an inversion there between the two of them.
Yeah. I'm actually. Oh, you know what? This is. We'll say this now. Shameless, like plug and asking a question. It's totally off topic, but I'll get into it. I am going to Hollow Wicked. If there's any listeners that are actually going to Hollow Wicked, please let me know. I'll probably be going there by myself. But if there's anybody there, that would be awesome that I could possibly meet up with. I mean, I'm sure there'll probably be somebody there that I might know. But any juggalos or any just regular people that happen to be going to Hollow Wicked, hit me up on Instagram or Twitter, and we'll try to meet up when I get there. I do have general admission tickets, so I don't know if you do, but and the reason why I'm saying that is I'm probably gonna bring my Venetian mask, but believe it or not, I did actually think about putting on fucking clown shit. And I planned on putting like things that looked like spiders above my head to be my optic nerves, and then I was gonna put that symbol underneath both eyes to represent my hyaloid canals and do some other shit. And that's how I tied this into wasting 2 minutes on that. Thanks. All right, continue.
Well, we talked about the green. 8 matches with green in gematria in the 4 main ciphers. So that top chart, those match in 4, and then the bottom ones match in 2 ciphers, and then the end one matches in that. But like even the Roman numeral 8 matches with 49, and it's like we're trying to figure out this enigma. And like, you know, if it's like has to do with Saturn, it's the end game, it's the cage, it's the last stop, the goalie, right? And then you brought up buttholes, so we have clinch.
Telling you, there's magic is in the butt.
And it's like the inhale, and then like, and just connected, even the stop sign is crash, it's speed. Karen, which is funny because Karen is like a archetype. Yeah, those are like, if any of those words kind of stick out in that. And then another one connecting it to the snake as well. The 8th prime number is 19. The 19th letter is S. So it's all hidden in there that it is that. And then one further, on the 49th day of gestation, it's proven that even the Egyptians knew this. On the 49th day that we are in the womb, we develop our pineal gland.
And 49 is that is a Jupiterian number. So that is really interesting. And then also, just to say this, Nick, because you brought this up a while ago, you said the green associated with the male energy. Well, in like the tantric chakra system, so not the 7 chakra system, but the 5 chakra system, the green sort of you could say sphere or luminant body is on the tip of a man's, you know, thing. And so that, but it comes back up. You're supposed to draw it in through visualization and then bring it back up to your throat. So there's something really interesting about
Thank you. All right. You want me to go on to the next one?
Yeah, sure.
29th.
Oh, it's a repeat, but then the last one was just like a way we saw it in a very common thing, with like the 8th prime number being 19, and then the VII being the 5 and a 3, 53. I cover that on like the Joker episode, how it's this very important code, but they wanted you to take 3 of them, and it's the 111, and even that vacation word equals 111, and then that V, right, is like the vampiric energy, and then it's like, oh, don't talk about it, shh, which is the saying shush is the S with that H as well, that kind of snake thing.
I like that. That's cool.
And that was that.
Thank you very much. That's awesome.
Amazing.
Yes. And now
that was mind blowing.
sorry, I didn't know it was gonna. Well, listen, I'm not complaining that it took that long. Just unfortunately, it is late. But Ethan, we can jump over to you now if you want to get into what you wanted to bring up.
Well, I hope I'm going to be able to keep it as deep and interesting as that was. That was awesome, man. You know, actually, one place I wanted to start is conveniently right beside you, the Tai Chi, or the yin yang symbol. And to get 8, the way I'm looking at it and the way it often turns out in psychology and more, I think it's often started with 4. And the yin yang symbol starts with the 4 primary energies. There's major yin and major yang, and then there's minor yin and minor yang, the dots within the swirls. And those are the kind of main primordial energies that actually are complementary and codependent, if you will, and are not necessarily only positive and negative in the terms that we might initially think of them. And they're always looking for balance, right? As they're flowing into and from one another. So that balance theme comes out. And from the yin and yang Tai Chi symbol, which we call the yin yang symbol, with the 4 elements or 4 energies, is the Bagua. And the Bagua is 8 elements that is our mountain, earth, very, very primordial elements like that are used in the divination practice of reading the sticks, or sometimes it's done with coins, but into the I Ching, which is, I believe it's the oldest still published book, right? It's like really, really old and primal. And so that whole system goes, which is very philosophical and extends to be very esoteric, but it starts at kind of fundamental ideas of polarity. Is all in that 4 and 8, or even one could say 1, 2, 4, and 8. The 1 being the unsaid center point, that the swirls are going around, and they are often considered or allegorized as snake energies. And so the yin yang symbol has this whole 4-8 concept behind it. And it's all about divination, which really is about connecting the finite with the infinite, as we went over there, and understanding how the earth operates with the heaven, and how man operates with heaven and earth as well, which really that trinity I think of as Hermes Trismegistus is the thrice great, because he is able to overcome the earthly, the human, and the heavenly, which really beckons right to your trinity that you just presented of the scorpion, eagle, and phoenix, right? So same kind of idea. So the yin yang is one of these philosophical concepts that really you can see how we get to the 4 and the 8. Another one, which is ancient and foundational into the thinking across all of humanity, more than likely, is called the tetralema. And the tetralema basically is the 4 mode of thinking, and that is most simply, it's also applicable to mathematical thinking as well, and logic and whole. And we have thesis, and we have, is the thesis correct or not, A and B there, and then you have neither and both. And of course this is used in Buddhism and Hinduism, but also really a logical foundational way to perceive a situation, or really practically anything, a good way to begin to consider anything. And it was recently when we were last speaking, actually, Nick, you mentioned blood. We were actually talking about numerology, of course, and so forth. And you mentioned, I think the blood has something to do with that. And I'm like, actually, wait, blood operates on the same kind of foundation as the tetralema, and breaks down into 8 main types. It's there's A, B, and AB and O blood types. All, that's the 4, and they're all in the formation of positive and negative RH, right? So, which is a whole, other well of, interesting, information on that. But it's interesting that goes from the 4 to the 8 as well. And there is, finally, just to break down the basics of it, there's what's called the analema, which ana for annual and lema for, again, line of thinking or mode of argument or something similar. The analema comes from, we can deduce that all spheres in orbit really have this, but we see the sun in tracking its highest point throughout the year actually makes an 8, or similar to close to an H, actually, in this, when the 2 snakes or 2 kind of H parts form together, you have this 8. But the analema results in orbiting the sun, and there's also one that results in the moon orbiting the Earth. The other planets, we don't have that visualization, but the analema is ultimately used for sailors finding out what date it is, right? It was actually a tool. So from the 4 seasons, which again, all spheres in orbit of each other across the universe is going to result in this. There is the analema, the 8 in visualization. And so now in relation to Hermes, of course, we have the yin yang symbol, which is like the snakes, and he also famously has the staff with the coiling snakes. But he also is named for Thoth and Tahuti, which has the town of worship, of course, was Kamenu in Egyptian, secondarily named Hermopolis. And the Kamenu are for the 8 primary gods of Egypt, right? Which actually, of course, they come in 4 pairs, right? Some people will point to these gods as being representative of aliens because they have snake and frog heads. But I think it was more of a primordial energy type of observation for these beings were, we can only imagine years ago before pollution, how bubbling of life the Nile must have been, right? So we have the eight Neiters are the original primordial gods of Egypt that don't directly correspond with the Bagua, the 8 energies of the Taoist understanding, but they do correspond in their primordial look at energy. The value of 8 really becomes something like that. That there's not only is there value in these processes themselves, but it's a kind of an interesting process that so many diverse cultures have gone with. So it becomes interesting itself, just in that, right? And the 8 Neiters are again this primary group of gods of ancient Egypt that maybe more than likely inspired Noah and his 3 sons and their wives. You have there the 4 pairs, and of the Egyptian gods, there the 8 Neiters, excuse me. There's the most popular, if you will, or well known now, and we can assume the most talked about, is Nu, which is phonetically so close to Noah. And Nu is depicted holding an ark with the other 7 gods. But also there's, it's a whole, the orientation and value placed on boats in the ancient Egyptian culture can't be understated, right? In fact, there's the light ark, right, where that they travel to the afterlife, and they found an ark at the base of the pyramid that they've put together. We don't know its relationship, but it just shows you how much value they had on the ark, which carried the 4 pairs more specifically than even the 8. That it carried the 4 pairs, yeah, we'll see the 4 pair dynamic come up again and again, and of course the Egyptian concept of the soul. I don't think these necessarily correspond with the Neeters, but the Egyptian concept of the soul had 8 parts, and it was in the 9th part is our mortal body. And so there were, the 8 there again. And then you look at the Great Pyramid, and it is, of course, a 4-sided base structure, but it has the indentations that, again, kind of reveal this 4 and 8 perpetuation. And even Jung is very much like the blood format, right? He has the thinking and feeling, one pair, and the sensation and intuition, the kind of secondary pair of understanding people, with each with a extroversion and introversion potential. So that also with the other really main divination practice, there's the 4 suits, and there's also a positive and negative kind of orientation, whether they're right side up or upside down, right? So that just goes to that same idea. I've been babbling on. Surely someone wants to build on that.
Well, if I could comment about the pyramid, if you can imagine another pyramid on top of the other pyramid, giving you that figure 8 as well as the 8 corners on each side, and that idea of these 2 meeting pyramids joined by the tip is kind of what you get when you can think about the aura viewing of certain objects. When we plant objects in the ground like signs and things, it's got sort of a dark shadow that gets cast on the ground in sort of a pyramidal shape. I don't know if you guys have ever done that, but if you try and aura view a sign, you'll notice there's a dark pyramid that comes off of it, just any road sign or whatever. But I think what the pyramids are kind of like a focus and a reflector of that pyramid shape into the earth. And it's changing the nature of how not only we see it, but how the earth is perceiving itself. So you'll have these areas that then change the nature of like the ley lines in those areas. And I believe that's really the connection with the pyramids. And this number 8 is, it's like an invisible barrier, right? And so if you think about 8 as being an invisible barrier, it's not something that mortals are necessarily conscious of, but it still exists. We're looking at one side of the loop, while the other side of the loop is providing that feedback that creates that invisible barrier that we're not seeing anymore. And I think that goes into a lot of what we see with ley lines is people are constantly in this feedback loop, and they're not realizing that there is another end to it because we're not aware of these other forces that are playing on our environments, which are playing on us.
Something I want to add real quick about that feedback loop, and like I meant to bring it up earlier because it's something we both, Headless, you kind of touched on earlier. There's a guy, there's a couple of people, and unfortunately their names are escaping me, but Ian McGilchrist is somebody that I'm very into with his ideas of like the brain and the eyes and all that stuff. And there is like kind of a theory. Well, first off, your eyes do project out to about 6 feet. It does project something out. But they are theorizing that there is some sort of feedback loop with all of this going back into your head. You know what I'm saying? So I even do wonder if there is like some sort of play like that. Like everything's like feeding into one of another, and I don't know.
It's how we come into form, right? I mean, we have to manifest it on some level for us to be a participant.
Yeah, right. It's deep shit if you really want to start getting into it. Go ahead, Ethan.
And several people have studied this subject trying to disprove its potential. But what is it called when someone's looking at you and you feel the beam coming off their eye? And not only do you know that there's someone looking at you, but it's Mr. So-and-so. And you turn around and there he is looking right at you. And so they've tried to disprove this. as being actual, but no, they ended up proving its potential, and even in very young people, and maybe even more so in young people, but intuitively, intuitive people certainly will get that. And I like to even consider, as far as intuition goes, I like to consider, maybe it's not necessarily even related to intuition, but it might be considered as. But with Tai Chi practice, I like to be able to sense my space, right? And just in a very physical mode. But when I think about it as an intuitive idea, and depending on where I am, depending on the circumstances, the space might be a little tighter or a little bigger. But if you look at a box, you being at the center point of that box, you actually can find a total of 8 points to hold a space. not to be too silly, but that's really the totality of a cube. Also, is the 8 corners, right? So this is kind of an intuitive idea. So just hold it down and be grounded, and keep a frame of reference, and maybe detect those.
Whoa! Hold
someone's
on.
looking at you.
Ooh, what was it? Okay? Resay all that again. I'm sorry, there, Ethan.
I was just saying how, like, if you hold the space and consider the 8 points of being the total points of a confined area that is now your area of sensitivity, your perimeter awareness space. It's just a neat way to imagine at first. Imagine, being sensitive enough to detect.
Yeah. Something I wanted to bring up, because you were making me think about it after, you said something. Oh, people staring at the back of your head, or people looking at you and you can feel them. I have seen stuff by Rupert Sheldrake, I think, if that's the correct name. Another guy that I've seen do stuff with Ian McGilchrist and a few other people. They've been on panels together, actually. Amazing work. They all look at things a little bit differently, but they come together, and I think it's crazy stuff that they talk about. And he does he has done studies on weird stuff where it's thinking somebody's staring at you, the phone, where they'll actually, it's gone beyond the percentage of, it just happened.
Chance.
Yes, it's gone. Yeah, it's gone past chance with people being able to know who's calling when they're calling. Even another one where, and this one gets wild and weird, but it's you'll get somebody who kind of supposedly is able to see energies or auras, and they'll get people who are actually missing limbs, and they'll act like they're pushing their phantom limb through the door, or through a certain square or something on the wall, and the person who's supposedly able to see the stuff will actually be able to describe exactly what box and area that arm is coming out of. And they said that's actually even matching more than chance. So there's there's something up with phantom limbs, and there's something up with people being able to see energy. He does weird experiments, and not to hijack the show over it, but if people are into that stuff, go look up Rupert Sheldrake. He really does some wild experiments with that. I've tried to get him on the show. That's somebody, fingers crossed, maybe one day down the road he'll eventually come on. But go check his stuff out, especially if you're into that weird shit.
There's great new research being done all the time when it comes to aura viewing and all the rest of that stuff. And I think people got so hoked out by it back in the 90s with all the crystals and everything else that they're really not looking into it too much anymore. But there's a lot of researchers doing some groundbreaking stuff, the aura can actually increase in size under an eclipse. And we've got an eclipse coming up. We're in eclipse season. So this next one's going to be interesting. I don't know why our energy fields expand under an eclipse, but something is happening there. And I think that it's expanding for downloading information or some other purpose. But it has something to do with the sun and the moon coming together to create that sort of energy feedback.
I agree.
Yeah, there is a Tai Chi meditation that is done sitting. and is kind of an empowering throne exercise for oneself, not to be king of others necessarily. But one facet is to sit on the edge of your chair. Men basically so that your testicles fall off the edge, right? Right on your right on your tailbone.
Don't sit on them before you do.
Yeah, well, there's all kinds of qigong with testicles in the Eastern arts, but we're not getting. We could do a show on that, right? But my point being that it's
great.
Testicles make the figure eight, right?
Oh my God.
Well, this meditation practice is sort of like a double loop into the dantian, or the navel, or our center. We basically, what you do, long and short, not to get too abstract, but you imagine that energy is coming through the earth up your legs and being released out your tailbone and your lower chakra, and it is doing that loop through the earth. And then another loop is coming from your true North Star, or the North Star, and it's going. That energy is going down and through your spine and looping and intersecting and combining with the other energy. And going back up and circulating. And that's one of the, I don't want to say it's simple, but it's a common meditation practice amongst Taoists. And you see the loop of the infinite coming together in oneself, and the loop through together with the loop of the finite on this planet. So just an interesting Taoist practice for those that meditate. But back to, and it also has the 8 shape, not a stretch of the imagination, but back to the 8 idea and the loop, not just that loop, that actually it's referred to as the loop, I think, often enough. We are the unity of the infinite and the finite, and the 4 dimensions and the 4 directions, the 4 dimensions of time and the 4 directions of space, and that is the 8 again. And the 4 dimensions of time are, of course, the trinity of time, I call it, past, present, and future, and the unsaid, which is very much to that tetralema formation, and that would be the timelessness. And different people have different concepts related to that, but it's really the place from where intuitive flickers might be sensed from, is a place of timelessness. But the 8 really is that unification of those I guess metaphysical ideas, but really also grounded too. In Tai Chi, there's all kinds of grounding. You like to be grounded as you get esoteric, I guess. Interestingly enough, in the West, there's the Chakana symbol, and it has kind of this dual 4 format that is similar to the Bagua, and at its center is called the navel, which is, again, that unsaid point of center in the in the yin yang symbol, that the swirls are going around, like the pole. That's why the yin yang symbol is called the grand ultimate polarity. So it's these energies going around, and really, I think people, when we try to pursue something or other, with Survivor or something, like people might try to become very proficient in one thing or another for their Survivor tour, but they don't pursue being balanced, right? And maybe that is often a more powerful approach, not being, hyper strong necessarily. And so eight becomes this connection loop, and it also beyond that is representative of a number of steps or a set. Just like with the analema, right? It becomes a set. And there's something on the tip of my tongue. Several other systems, of course, have this idea, but most specifically, that originally kind of got me into finding this East-West orientation is the Bagua and the 7 hermetic lessons of the Kybalion, if you will, which are often, I think they're very powerful, but they're often degraded maybe because they have some pop culture context to them. But if you look at them in regards to the Eastern traditions, they're very much, or also the Eastern traditions, maybe they're definitely very valuable lessons that can help. And these the 7 of the Kybalion can be combined with what is the unsaid 8th part, which is care or patience, and both of those result from practicing them, right? Patience is, all of us are saying, well, I don't have patience, but it's cultivated in its practice, right? Like so many things. But I think orienting ourselves to these universal laws or these divination lessons, if you will, out of the Bagua and the I Ching and so forth, allows us to be more balanced. Right? We'll pick and choose a direction that'll get us more into the center. And so that's, I think, all of that, all of the lessons around the sets of 8 and 8 in itself, we're looking to find that balance in the human of the earthly and the heavenly.
Well, I think what you're saying about the balance and patience, I think, are really closely combined, because as you're moving up that ladder, that H ladder, right, what ends up happening is you end up widening the loops. So that creates that balance automatically. So as your perceptions sort of increase, there's a deeper loop that you're creating on the other side as it comes back to you. So there are, forces as you increase in your own perceptions and your own ability to create wisdom, you actually get deeper into a more resounding cycle. But that balance is always going to naturally be there. Again, back to the karma thing. So if we're on karma and that 8 number, what you're doing by increasing your loop is you're creating a bigger karma circle on the other side. So, if you've got a small amount of perception and you're acting in that small amount of perception, you're going to have more immediate karma. But as you're widening your perception, as you're widening your actions to be more in tune with the world around you, then you're going to be, reaping a little bit more on that other side, but it's going to be a natural process.
Yeah, I feel that. And I feel like you can be balanced at different levels, right? That's kind of what you're saying, right? We can have balance at a lower level and not necessarily see X, Y, and Z, but balance can also be refined itself.
Sorry, Ethan, I just want to go back a little bit to what you said that I found that was really interesting. Was you were talking about the 4 corners, or the 8 corners of the cube. Well, in the sort of tantric conception, that there are 8 time kings who stand on each corner of the 8-pointed star. So that's something really interesting. Number one.
Wow.
Number two, I think Chinese is just a perfect example of a Ketu language. Someone has one of the older authors from the early 19th or 20th century. He did speak on this. Like he said, he categorized all the languages, and Chinese came up as the Ketu language, and that makes a lot of sense because it can be read upwards and downwards, right to left, left to right. So there's like an inherent flexibility with it. And then also something else that you said that I found really interesting was, I'm sorry, I lost my train of thought, but I just wanted to spit those.
I pulled one of my moves.
Yeah, really interesting.
Great build.
Just pulled the Nick.
And it reminds me, I wanted to say about 8 being representative of a set and or even cycle. Well, the Analema, of course, is one, but Ishtar, the goddess, her number, or rather her symbol, is the 8-pointed star. And the reason for that is because of the 8-year cycle of Venus. She's the goddess of Venus, and it has an 8-year orbit, 8 Earth years for its orbit. And so they're even pointing to that as a measurement of a cycle.
Something before, could have been mentioned. I don't remember. But I have always thought of, kind of reminds me of a native is even like an hourglass, which then kind of like that,
Oh yeah.
Involves time.
That's Saturn and time.
Yeah. And like in my opinion, I really just feel like time really only exists kind of like right now and here. You know what I'm saying? In this reality, maybe. I don't know. I don't think it's the same somewhere else. But I have wondered about that, like something going along with that. One thing I did want to mention, this is just from hearing numbers and, the 2, 4, 6, and 8, stuff like that. There was a few things I wanted to mention. One, with the planetary squares, or planetary sigils, really, for these things, if you're into planetary magic or magical squares, from like 8, 6, and 4, if you look at their sigils, they kind of are eventually, I think, like if you look at 8 and then 6 and then 4 is going to be like a mixture of kind of 6 and 8. But like if you start looking at 4, you will start to see how like either flipping things over and doubles and stuff, you start to see like the play on the 2 and the 4 and the 6 and the 8, like all over the thing. And I do find like that like really interesting. Like even in the sigils for them, you could start seeing like the number play, like we're talking about. And then another thing I just wanted to add to, it's kind of like I should have said it in the beginning, but another reason why I also get big on like the 2, 4, 6, and 8 with I start talking about the eyeballs and stuff is because even the pupil constricts from like 8 to 6, 6 to 4, and 4 to 2. So even those numbers are coming into play again with the eyeball and the twisting of the pupil.
Well, that actually brings up something interesting too, because if you guys have never noticed about birds like pigeons, right? They're always moving their head as they walk, but they're doing so to get the vision correct. So they'll put their head in the place that they move their body under. And our eyes do the same thing. They don't move in a smooth line. They move in a jerky fashion. Right? And it's moving by twos and not by singles. If it was by singles in a single sweep. So it's almost like our perception is based around these pairs of numbers or these pairs of vision.
That's our eyes are yoked, like you're saying. So normally they both look with each other, and normally, unless they unyoke, your pupils are going to dilate together at the same time. You know what I'm saying? That's why I do say, and I'm not patting myself on the back when my pupils are both different. I think that is a sign of something. You know what I'm saying? They're not yoked anymore. They've gone in different directions. So I see what you're getting with that for sure. And that's doubles. Yeah.
Right.
That makes a lot of sense, because if you're reflecting something onto the surface of water and the water is kind of moving towards something that we can't see, things would appear doubled. Things would appear, right? They would appear like moving in multiplicity. And that's really like what just said is all about, what Jupiter is all about, is like infinite expansion into space. And so I think that there's like when you were talking about the phantom limbs, I kept thinking, oh my God, that's like exactly like Binah. It's like there's still something there. Like you're not out, you're not dead. Like you're still like you still have a spirit, or you still have a soul, or something is still there that you're able to sort of experience. Maybe you don't perceive it, which again, Jupiter, so that 4 always comes up, right? And then something is still there, so you're still in the multiverse, we'll say, when you have the phantom limb pushing through the wall. But you're not quite out of the cycle. You're still within the cycle, and you haven't quite broken out. And it's interesting also that Rahu and Ketu, like when you're looking at the astrology for Rahu, Saturn, he can affect Saturn, but the deities of Saturn cannot affect him. So there's still like a 9. There's still like one more thing that has to move forward before you can clear Ketu, before you can clear Rahu from your like negative, if they're in a negative position from your chart. Like you have to go for different deities that are not associated with Saturn. So even though it's the end of that cycle, it's sort of like it's the beginning of the infinite loop. But I think that there's also like something to be said about the experiences. Like Ethan's talking a lot about, like I read the Taoist book, The Inner Teachings of Taoism, translated by Thomas Cleary, and he was talking about like how there are 3 fundamental components for human life. It is true lead, true mercury or quicksilver, and true earth or clay. So really there's like a fundamental thing that happens with like in particular like Saturn, Mercury, and whatever Earth is, or us, or maybe it's just our physical body. But yeah, and you could totally say that's your eyes too. So I think that there's definitely something it's talking about. Like it's very multiverse. It's very Dzogchen. It's very weird. But yeah, I think everyone's right. I think that there's no. That's kind of the trick of Saturn. It's all about perception, and then it's also about conceptualization. Like time is very conceptual. It's just we use different calendars to demarcate it, but we can also discard or like invent new ones. We're not so bound. So time maybe isn't our enemy. Maybe it's more of our friend. Just like I was thinking about that.
I think time is like the most tangible abstraction we have.
Yeah.
So it's the closest abstraction to our existence, even though it's not really real, but it's that closeness. And I think that actually goes into sort of the mystery of spirit and body. Like you were talking about before, these 2 things are yoked together. So it's like 2 loops. We've got the physical and we've got the spiritual on either side of these things. And so when one is cut, the other one still exists. We're still bound to it. And so there's that yoking and unyoking that we view as death and birth, but it's really part of a much bigger cycle.
See, this is another reason why I think that snake is wrapped around that egg. It's because of the yolk in there.
Yep. Orphic egg.
Yeah.
Time is also an anagram for might, which could be like slicing, like a miter saw or something, but then it's also angular, but then it's also like our own might. I don't really believe in time. The only thing that has me stumped is our heartbeat. Our heartbeat has a tempo. That's the only thing I can't figure out with time, is that we have this heartbeat, and our heartbeat raises and lowers, just like time slows
constant
down
chaos,
and speeds up, and same kind of thing, right? Like, yeah.
Well, I think it goes back to that Taurus field again. Like there was a comment earlier about the Taurus and the shape as it relates to the number 8 on the side, I guess the infinity symbol.
Yeah.
And also the heart has been found to actually be a flat plane that's been wrapped together, and so the 4 chambers in the heart are wrapped together, in that sort of 8 fashion as well. So there's that as well. So I think the heart and 8 are really closely related as well.
I just want to respond to Lisa, and she asked a great question. Time is only a method of measurement, does not exist if there is no mass. Is that correct, Jen? So I would say that that is probably correct. That once you're out of, like, there's a form, but it's like subatomic at that level, like the phantom limb level. And so it would just be something without mass. That would make a lot of sense to me as well.
Yeah. I've even felt like, again, like I had said before, and it's just from my own experiences, I don't think time, at least, isn't the same from experiences that I have. Because, like, if I'm somewhat close to, like, you're kind of, like, you know, on the verge of death, I just feel like my experiences, I should have been dead if I was gone as long as it seemed to be. I honestly think it's only seconds. You know what I'm saying? If that. But it definitely does not, the whole thing, too, it doesn't feel like you have mass. It feels like you actually lose it as you're going there. Like, you feel like you're literally, like, melting. So, like, maybe even that's something to do with why time isn't the same, because you're not really in the same sort of, you know, I don't know, density. Who knows? I don't know what I'm trying to get at with that. But mass.
No, that makes a lot of sense, Nick. It really does, because, yeah, time is really in your mind. That's like that's what they always tell us, like in Dharma talks and Tibetan and Buddhism. They always say that, like, time is in your mind, but it's also real. It's also like something you have a contextual and a conceptual relationship with. And so maybe when you're at those higher worlds, like, they do describe it as having different times, like the gods, the devas, they exist not in our time. They have their own time, and their experience of time is maybe not the same as our experience of time, because our lives are much shorter in comparison, but still, like, you know, maybe a day for them is still, maybe that is like still a day. Maybe there's a relative sort of correspondence you can make. But I agree with everything you're saying, that you're still in time, and I always think of it as, obviously in my Buddhist way, is like Mahakala. So he's always there. It's just that you have to negotiate, like, sort of like very mercurial in some ways. You have to negotiate a sort of like expansion of your ability to move outside of form.
I think that's exactly it. So I think form and mass and density are all tied to time. And the way we experience time here isn't universal. And so having the different conceptions of these different densities and these different types of form, because if you think about it, when it comes to relativity, they talk about how moving at a faster rate is not only going to increase your mass, but it's also going to slow down time for you. So if you go around the solar system and then come back, time will have moved slower for you than everybody else still on Earth.
I wonder if, like, not to, like, sound like weird, but, like, could, like, diet and drugs even, like, change your perception of time in the flesh? Or how much metals you have in you?
Think about all those glitch in the matrix stories where people are experiencing time at different rates. You know, I mean, I think that the idea that we're all sort of moving in the same direction and we're all on the same plane, I think that's just as fallacious. You know, I don't think we are. I think we move through different parts of this strange multiverse that's sort of overlapping and combining all the time.
See, now, like, this will, like, get crazy and stuff, but, like, even with gravity, you know, somebody was saying they question gravity. I do question that too. I think it's more of magnetism. And, like, not to, like, get crazy out there, but, like, it is a theory of mine that's, like, based on a theory that's not even sure, but, like, they're starting to think that, you know, birds might have, like, magnetic pupils or eyes. And if, like, you think about it, regardless, I mean, you just turn the magnet the other way and you're going to project out of your eye. Mm-hmm. You know, that's just a reverse side effect, you know, and you know what I'm getting at? Like, so you're just twisting, you know, changing the poles. So, like, I do wonder, like, if there's kind of something going in as well on humans. And I do start to, I forgot where I was going with all that now. I just pulled a Jin/Nick.
Well, I think too, to that point, like, that we almost get subtly culturally trained to operate in a certain way, like, right, to that biphasic sleeping idea. Like, yeah, mostly you really need sleep, but sometimes you do it because it's just what everyone else is doing, right? Like, if you are really living a super nutrient dense life and getting your minerals and everything. You're not necessarily high on caffeine either, but you just find yourself not needing as much sleep, but everyone's asleep, so you might as well sleep. And isn't that, talk about like the allegorical sense of consciousness, like everyone around you is proverbially or spiritually asleep, so I might as well be asleep too.
Well, I think that's the real draw with Saturn energy, is that it yokes everybody into a certain perception of time.
Right. Yeah, it's seductive.
Right.
The we don't even necessarily need to be overtly not trained, but exposed to patterns rather, and we'll adopt them. But that's really what makes us distinct too, is because we can adopt new patterns and refined patterns, right? We're a blank slate at any time in our life, really, and can do different, operate differently and more refined.
Think about the threat of jazz at the beginning of the 20th century. All these different governments were like, oh, we got to stop this because it's out of time. It's out of sync with all the rest of everything else.
Oh, that's funny. I like that. Oh, that's
well, music is totally tied to time.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
Timing.
And once you get...
Oh, you got amazing timing.
Notes, you control the notes, you control the mind, So if you get a certain type of, energy that's off sync with everything else, you're going to be changing people's conception of time.
Great build. Yeah, that's awesome. Great way to put it.
And when you're like dialed in, or like a lot of adrenaline or something, like, and you're kind of speeding up, and that's when time slows down. That's when you can watch the clock go. And same with music, like when you're dialed into that instrument and you're like in the recording studio or whatever, you hear so much space in between each count, like so much, and you can fine tune it so much too as well. Right.
It's the idea of being able to be in the moment that really speeds up or slows down time.
Yeah, I've played a lot with time, like in sports and stuff. Speed up the game, slow down the game. I was always known for slowing the game down, but I would do this when I worked in restaurants, and I was a chef. But I was like worked in a lot of open kitchens. A lot of times I'd be taking the food out, taking orders, and that kind of thing. And I would get everyone on this slower vibe to have this rhythm and kind of conduct everything. And it would be like the difference between going up to a table and being like, "Hey, what can I get you?" and going up and being like, "Hi, how are you doing today?" And I'm like, you're literally slowing time down, and you're creating these like rhythm is like out of the chaos.
Absolutely. Yeah, I love that, because that goes into leadership too. Because not only are you controlling time, but you're controlling everybody else's rhythm. And once they can get into that rhythm, then they can start to speed up. And I saw that a lot in the Army too. Like once people get into that rhythm, that's when everything starts to happen, because when everybody's going their own direction, it stops working quite so much. But once they get in step, that's when they can all start singing together, and they can do cadences and all the rest of this amazing stuff with their formations, just because they're on a different time scale.
Yeah, well said.
Well, even you start getting into music, 8 start playing into stuff. Again, it's interesting.
Oh yeah. 8 notes, 16
4s and 8s. Like, well, most Western music's 4/4. Most worldly music isn't. And I think that has to do with the reflection of like the Western world we live in, where everything is a box, everything is 4s, everything is this kind of straight line structure. And like another way that is, it's like the heavy metal and the chugging and stuff. That's a very industrial noise. It's a car revving its engine. It's like that kind of that Western feel. So that's why I think a lot of Western music is that 4 time, because it's a reflection of this world.
The Taoists have the yin yang, which we talked about, the 4 aspects of it, and then also the 5 energies or 5 elements, which is often depicted as a pentagram, which, oh, look out, right? A right side up pentagram, not an inverted pentagram. But these are the main difference being there's no air, but there's metal. Metal is for air. There are
5 elements move in a different way than we normally think about. We normally think about the cross sections because we're all about, cycles and counter cycles sort of acting on each other. But when it comes to Taoist or Chinese elements, you're moving around the circle. You're not moving within it.
A big part of the 5-element theory is movement towards balance, but it one of the main little allegories of it is, there's wood is one of the 5 elements too, and there is a fire, the wood burns, and there's 2 elements, and that becomes mineralized, and that becomes the earth, and it grows and becomes wood again. So it's a very, cyclical kind of movement oriented 5 elements.
Right.
Very well said.
I think it's interesting about the 4/4 movement of music in terms of like if you were thinking cultural management or like magicians using like the frequencies of music to you could say manipulate people or whatever it is, but that actually makes sense, even though Jupiter is like a great beneficent planet, because you're moving them into the realm of ideas. You're taking them outside of their original ideas and you're moving it into a progressive way, like just explicitly very, you're taking them outside of their conception, so that would make sense. And then also because Saturn and the moon are so closely linked, there's like a very deep link together, and sound is really something that the moon produces very acutely. It's like where we first encounter frequency. So I think that there's something really interesting with that, like how you can play with time, and time's always depicted in iconography as holding a damaru, or I think TJ brought up the idea of the heartbeat. So it's like the heartbeat of God. He's shaking his little hand drum as he walks through the abyss, I guess. And so I think there's something also really interesting with that, and music plays like a big part of it. And they always say, like, if you meet Mahakala, or the Time King, in the Great Cremation Ground in the abyss, I guess, you're supposed to laugh at him, say ha 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 ha, and he loves that because he'll laugh too. You may not understand or hear it, but he loves a laugh. So I think that there is something in there, the repetition, that kind of breaks up our relationship with time, you could say.
Interesting.
Well, I know in the Greek tradition, you would have Dionysian poetry, and you would have Apollonian poetry, right? And the Dionysian poetry was far more ecstatic, so it was an ecstatic experience. And then the Dionysian poetry was far more regimented, segmented, and very much on timing. And so these two different forces would sort of shape how people would celebrate and experience those holidays related to these gods. And so it was almost as if like Dionysus was Apollo with a different mask on, sort of like letting it all hang out. And Apollo was sort of the straight-laced and buttoned up form of Dionysus.
Just a complementary polarity there too.
Right. Well, I think that goes into a lot of Jesus Christ symbolism as well, because you've got sort of that polarity that shifted after Christianity came in, but he was really Dionysian, but also straight-laced and buttoned up. So what happened to that, that sort of freewheeling spirit? And what we find is that freewheeling spirit seems to like to come in during these times of Renaissance, and then it's immediately put into form as this Apollonian sort of Jesus. And then, it sort of goes back and forth if you think of these things like an egregore, so you've constantly got this split between this Luciferian energy, this sort of out of control creativity. And then on the other hand, you've got this straight-laced, buttoned up, son of Zeus that is much more militaristic and regimented.
Yeah, I agree with Nick Cook in the chat. He said the twins. So I think this Gnostic idea of the Syzygy is really important and really interesting in comparison to like what Headless was saying about the sort of Luciferic energy. So again, it's very Saint Michael, like moving from Hod into Tipperith, and then you have like the daughter at Yesod, the daughter at the moon. So then there's the direct. Who is the mother? The daughter is the mother, but she also is her own person. So then that's obviously Venus to Yesod. So you have something really interesting happening there where you're having a Luciferic figure contain, well, we would say the Christ figure contains like all the compassion, and then the daughter contains like the emptiness, like the luminous sort of knowledge. And so it's both of them together in synthesis that sort of is our ability to climb the tree more than like personification of deities or anything, but it's the two together. It's like the Christ, the real Christ is a twin. That's what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, couldn't agree more.
I could add to that. First, I wanted to bring up that karma in gematria equals 44. So we got the 2 4s, and we got the, right, creating that 8 and everything, and 8, the very karmic word. So that's very interesting. Another one in Chaldean numerology, they only go up to 8. 9 is sacred to them. So 8 is like this high, is still a sacred number because it's the highest number before the sacred number 9. And then I liked when Ethan brought up about care and patience, because that goes back to the H and the hospital, because you become a patient and you're waiting for your care, right? So it's like kind of a revelation of the method within that kind of culture. And then another one is with the 2 and the twins and everything, 2 cubed, 2 to the power of 3 equals 8. So that's like, so like what was tripping me out on that is like with vision. I see that vision, our vision and our perception of things is on a 2-dimensional plane, much like a TV screen. It's our judgment that the tree further away is smaller. So we're still looking at like a flat screen picture, and the tree bigger, we then our eyes tell our brain that tree's closer, the smaller tree telling us that our eyes are, or that tree's further away. So that's just with like the 2 cubed and the 2 eyes and the twins and the looking into the cube, everything that was kind of circling my brain a bit.
I like that.
Epic.
Was anything else anybody wanted to add?
Oh, I just wanted to, sorry about that. Go ahead.
No, sorry, I'm mumbling.
Oh, my apologies, Ethan. I mean, I would rather you go, but
no, please.
No, I just the number 8. I didn't mention this when I was talking about 8 Chinese as a dragon sort of language or dragon alphabet, but the 8 is so important, and specifically it mean like it's the denotation of happiness, it's the denotation of fortune, so and wealth, obviously, and so there is like an idea in Chinese that wealth can only last 3 generations. So then you have the 3 and the 8 together, which is obviously 11. And so I don't know, there's just something really interesting with that, and how there's a relationship between time and 8. And then, you know, the Chinese conception of Saturn is quite different. It's the most different of all the astrologies that I've ever seen. He is he's not a little boy, he's like an androgynous figure, and he's riding a deer. And that also speaks to the Vedic conception of Mercury, where he's like a sort of effeminate prince, and he's riding like a chimera, which is like a lion, but it has the elephant's trunk. So there's something like really interesting there where like Mercury and Saturn kind of mirror each other. Like there's and like how you guys were even talking about how speech, like that is the sort of method of people to change the tempo or change the repetition of pattern in people's action. So that would be exactly that relationship. That would be Saturn going back down, like the understanding of a pattern of timing, and then you're speaking it out. So that would be Mercury. So there must be something really innate in the relationship between those two that allows the magician to sort of make things happen on the material world. Sort of what I'm thinking.
That's beautiful.
Well, I think a lot of that Saturn as a boy goes into the the New Year's concept. So you've got the New Year's baby, and then you've got the, the old year that's going out. And so that whole relationship right there, I think, is encompassed in a lot of different ideas of Kronos or Saturn.
Very well said. Very well said. I mean, even the child. I mean, a lot goes with Saturn. I do find the antlers very interesting. So,
Well, I just thought of Santa Claus and Santa anagram for Satan, right?
Yeah.
It's like the Saturn time of the year.
I was even like, it's interesting how like I had an idea for a piece of art. I don't think I'm gonna go with the antlers. I think my other option would probably look better. But I was thinking of adding antlers to like myself and a thing that's being made for the podcast with like lemons or pomegranates hanging from. Like, probably really would have been weird looking, but it was deeply occult, and I was like, But it's like, it's interesting. Like, I wonder if like the reason of the antlers is the same thing. It's cool when I have an artistic idea, and then it seems like, oh, that popped up there, and maybe it's the same thing. It's interesting.
That'd be really interesting to have.
Sorry, Headless.
Well, I was just going to say, like, you've got Christmas, you've got antlers, and you've got pomegranates, which is like the underworld, and lemons, which is like the sun. And then you've got all that over like a hearth with, the stockings hanging from it. That's just a really interesting image because it's got like everything right there.
Yeah. It was going to be very, but I think I'll probably just go with a Jester hat or something like that. Almost getting away with the same shit. Yeah. Is anybody else got to add anything? The only reason why is because now we're at about the 2-hour mark, and I figured I would wrap it up before people start.
No, that was fascinating. I'm blown away every time. I thought I knew all of it, and then to hear what you guys have to say, there's so much to it.
Oh, well, that's why I bring everybody together, because it's kind of everybody sticking to their own specialty, which it's different. Yeah, I love it. I really appreciate you guys. I really appreciate this panel. I know we're already, we're going to be back tomorrow. We'll be going live. We'll have some extra people with us, but we will be back tomorrow. TJ, I didn't have you on because there was no numbers. Sorry, totally forgot. But if you want to come on, you can. But I mean, we're going to be talking about water and consciousness. Or water is consciousness. Oh, do you?
Yeah.
I mean, listen, if you're available tomorrow, I'll throw you the link, and you're welcome. It'll be a party tomorrow night. But we'd love to have you actually. We'll be doing this again tomorrow. And I think the panel, like I was saying, everybody has their own interpretations, everybody has their own specialties, and I think we all come together and really learn from each other at the same time. And I really do appreciate it, and I appreciate all the stuff in the chat. We got a lot of great stuff in the chat, a lot of, I'm not trying to brag, but I think we have a lot of intelligent listeners, and I appreciate their input or their ideas and theories as well. And I try to throw up on the screen as much as possible. And, I do highly suggest to check out the live chat if it's ever still up. Sometimes I do take them down. It's really just for the hardcore fans. They get to catch the live sometimes for a few days, and then I take it down. But, again, thank you, everybody. And real quick, we'll go around one more time. And, Headless, let everybody know what is up and where they can find your work.
You can find me on X. My next podcast is going to be about archonic politics. So a little bit of metapolitics going on there.
Awesome. And tomorrow night, even after, this guy's going to be a madman. He's going to do a live show with us and then jump onto Twitter Spaces, and he's going to run town hall in there for a few hours. So definitely highly suggest to go check out Hellas's Spaces as well.
Yeah, look up Future is Ancient on X. We'll get a good space going. Yeah. You'll enjoy it.
Yeah, I think you need to. You don't mention it that often. That's why I always try to bring it up. You need to promote that more when you come on. So
I do.
Yeah, definitely. Like I do with the website. I always forget. Definitely check out Hellas's Twitter Spaces. TJ, what is up, my man? Let everybody know where they can find your social media or anything that you got going on.
Everything at Contemporary Problems. There's most likely an underscore on it. And then like my more numerology stuff is Synchronicity, it's called. So you could find that there for the more numerology stuff, because a lot of people go to Contemporary Problems and it's not really too much about the numbers, but it I just might not directly talk about the numbers, but it's all incorporated in everything I do. So yeah.
Awesome. And Jin, let everybody know where they can find Jin the Ninja.
Awesome. So thank you guys so much. Everybody on the panel was really great. You can find me at Wukong Reborn, WUKONG Reborn on X, and obviously my show Threshold Saints, and just released episode 24, Clock Shavings. It's about spirit channeling. I think it was a really good, strong show. And then so then next week I have episode with Baleful Rays, and we're doing a lot of Steiner and Aramon stuff. So if you're interested in that, check it out.
Don't forget your Tracy Twymans though.
Oh yeah, man. Obviously today, I literally just before I came on, Tracy Twyman. So part 3, and there'll be we're going to be up to 9 parts. So, wow.
Go make sure you check that shit out before her ex-husband slaps her with the DMCA and it all comes down.
Yeah. Get it while you can.
And I just fucked him up now. He's fucked now because I just.
Okay. But I'm on Apple and Spotify, so everybody can go look those up.
Yes. Yeah. And you know what? Another reason why I'm bringing that up. I'm going to be honest. I haven't listened to much of it. I listened to one episode for a little bit, but I have had tons of people actually tell me his series is amazing on that. So I'm going by that, and I highly suggest to go check it out.
Well, I appreciate that. Thank you, Nick.
Of course, yeah, and I don't listen to. I've said it on the show before. I just don't listen to podcasts anymore, so don't take it personal.
No, not at all. That you're shouting it out makes me feel great. So
yeah, of course. And Ethan, the guy who came up with the topic and created this great discussion. If it wasn't you that brought it, we would never have had this discussion. So thank you.
Well, I'm honored to be involved because you guys broke it down like combined, made things epic. I really appreciate you guys. So it's more fun. The more the merrier. Contemporary, the beginning breakdown was awesome, man. And Headless, you always blow my mind. Jin, likewise. You always come up with great, mind-blowing information. And yeah, I'm on all the usual social media, and I got a couple of websites that I promote on there. And, I curse the archons of politics as well, and I try to get into spiritual discussions and so forth. So.
Awesome. And thank you very much again, all of you. I'm pretty sure as of right now, all their links are in there. So if you want to go check out their stuff, it should all be in the notes now. Thank you again, people in the live chat. That is what's up. I appreciate all the input. And again, come check out the Occult Rejects tomorrow. We will be live as well with 2 other people. So fucking party, 7 people. Jesus Christ. I'll just sit there and smoke joints the whole time and shut up. Oh, man. It'll be a good time. Definitely check it out. And thank you all again. And until the next one, everybody be well. Later.